Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Debbie. And yes, I'm one of the grants officers at Sussex Community Foundation. And firstly, a big thank you to Debbie, Claire, and the whole team at RVA for this afternoon's. And I think quite rightly to sort of call it an event. It's zooming down to Bexhill has been really useful and really interesting for me as a funder to hear the other funders. And I think one of the things that struck me is just how important the role of RVA and other infrastructure organisations across the county is in terms of being able to act as a conduit, as a way of bringing groups together and bringing funders together to explain that there's a lot of funding available, but often the great challenge is actually trying to link people up with the right funding for what it is that they want to achieve, and we're very conscious of that as well. So a big thank you for the work that you do with that, and actually enabling us to sort of explain and meet with groups and hopefully get people to the funding. We want to give it out, and we want to we want to link people up. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to, rather like the other speakers, I am going to talk a little bit about our grants programme, a little bit about Sussex Community Foundation, how you access our grants programmes, including some details about the main grants that are being offered, some tips which relate to writing your application to us, but I think are quite general as well. So hopefully you will find them useful in terms of writing an application for a wide variety of funders. And the all-important, but sometimes overlooked, reporting back or monitoring sort of process. And just a little bit around some tips for that, because it's something that, as I say, is important and sometimes doesn't get quite the attention that it needs. And of course, at the end, there'll be some time for questions and answers. So a little bit of background about Sussex Community Foundation. We are one of 46 UK-wide community foundations, and we cover the whole of the UK. And if you take all those community foundations together, we're actually one of the largest non-government grant-making bodies in the United Kingdom. Within Sussex, what we're doing is to raise funds, and then we use those funds to make grants, fairly small grants, to local charities and community groups addressing disadvantage and need, and more broadly, helping to build communities across East and West Sussex and Brighton and Hove. And anyone who's engaged with us will know that we're a relatively small team. We are now 10 strong. We're normally based in Lewes, but since last March, we've all been working remotely across Sussex. I'm currently at the moment sitting up in Crawley, so I'm quite a long way from Bexhill, but we are all sort of joined up, and we're looking forward to sort of getting back together more as a team, and hopefully doing some work actually based in Lewes in the not too distant future. So our grants, an introduction. In the course of a normal year, we normally expect to be awarding round about £2 million in grants right across Sussex. But as we know, the past 12 months were anything but normal. And by the end of March 2021, we'd ended up awarding over 4.6 million in grants. And that's a blend of money. That's money that we would normally give out through our general grants programs, more of that in a little while, and funding which was very specifically designed to support activities or projects which responded to the COVID crisis. And so where does all that money come from? Well, the funding for our general grants comes from around about 100 donors who are mainly Sussex-based individuals and organisations, and they will mostly have a particular area of interest. That might be geographical, or it might be thematic. So for instance, they might be interested in children and young people, older people, homelessness. Those are the obvious ones, but increasingly we're seeing donors wishing to direct their funds towards, say, the arts, the environment, or areas like digital inclusion. We do also administer a range of national programmes for funders such as the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, Nationwide, Comic Relief, but these tend to be larger pots of money, and so they're out of the scope of what I'm talking about today, but you should just be aware of them. And I think the important thing is to say that what all the donors have in common is a desire to address disadvantage and need, and to help build strong and resilient communities. The crisis funds for the grants, which I'll talk about also, come through a mix of public donation. We've had people contributing right across Sussex to that. The statutory sector, and here I would mention East Sussex County Council and West Sussex County Council, who are both significant funders in that respect. And of course, national bodies such as the National Emergencies Trust, the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, and indeed the Co-op. So across our grants programme, we've got a common message. It's very much focusing on supporting grassroots community groups and small to medium-sized voluntary organisations and charities with an annual turnover of up to £1 million and grants that go between £1,000 to £5,000. So, let me just go back, sorry. So accessing our grants. So the impact of the COVID pandemic and the experience of the past 12 months has meant that not only have we had to be extremely agile in responding to the needs of the sector in terms of funding, but also how our grant making looks as we start the new financial year. And the broad pattern of funding over the next, certainly over the next 6 months or so, looks like this. We've got 3 main funding streams. We've got the Sussex Crisis Fund, Phase 3, which is a rolling programme, which means you put in your application and we deal with the applications as they come in on a rolling basis. We've got a new Made by Sport Clubs in Crisis Fund with a deadline of the 4th of June. And then we've got our general grants, 2 rounds left this year with deadlines on the 7th of May, so coming up very soon, and the 10th of September. And all of these are currently open and all of them have online applications. So let's start with the Sussex Crisis Fund, Phase 3. This is very much, just go back. This is very much a continuation of and building on the first 2 phases of the fund, which ran through 2020. And those phases reflected the shifting nature of response and need within the sector. And based on evidence from those delivering services and support, we did a lot of listening to what people were telling us. We know that things look very different now. And but there's still a very strong need for funding to support community and voluntary sector organisations assisting those people who are most affected by the COVID-19 outbreak. The 3rd phase is particularly aimed at helping people who are experiencing greater health inequalities due to COVID-19 and facing acute financial difficulties as a direct result of the pandemic. And we're particularly looking here at encouraging applications supporting people disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. So women, Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities and children and young people. So within this, sorry, let me just make sure I've got the right slide here. Yeah. So what will we fund within the next phase of the crisis fund? Well, grants of up to £10,000 are available for delivery over a 12-month period, and those cover the following themes: mental health and well-being, advice and support services, digital inclusion, reconnecting people and communities, and costs associated with providing food and other vital support. As I say, it's a rolling programme, no deadline. It's open now, and there's a 3 to 4 week turnaround. So it's a pretty quick response. And that's again sort of something that we've learned a lot about over the past 15 months. We've needed to move into that sort of way of thinking and operating, and we've been able to do that. You can get the online application form and full guidance. And again, the details of these will be available again at the end of the presentation. The second pot of money is the Made by Sport Clubs in Crisis Fund grants. This is a national initiative, and it's being offered through the network of community foundations across the UK. The coronavirus pandemic obviously has had a significant impact on young people across the country, and thanks to Made by Sport means that we can offer a chance for sports clubs and organisations to access vital funding, which can then help them continue bringing sport into young people's lives. It's part of a wider campaign that believes sport is one of the best vehicles for creating societal change for young people across the range of challenges that they face in today's world. And what it's doing is offering unrestricted grants of up to £2,021 to clubs and community organisations with an annual turnover of up to £75,000. And it uses sport to improve people's lives, addressing mental and physical well-being. The key themes which the fund is looking for, or for sport to address in relation to young people, are developing life skills, building stronger communities, improving mental health, developing employability skills, and reducing crime and antisocial behaviour. Again, there's a bespoke application form and set of criteria, and the applications for that close on Friday, the 4th of June, and we would expect the outcome of those applications to be known during the middle of July. The third pot of money are our general grants, and these will be ones that groups that have engaged with us will be more familiar with. We have three, let me just check. Yeah. Here we are. Our general grants with a closing date of the 7th of May. We have 3 grant rounds a year, closing dates in January, May and September. And again, if you want to find out what's happening in each round, then visit our How It Works page on our website, or sign up for our regular grants e-bulletin, which is a really good way of keeping in touch and publishes very regularly. So each round will have the general awards, and these are where the majority of applications to us come from. It's a large pool of different funds. These are the 100 or so that I referred to, and they address need, disadvantage across Sussex. And the good news, I think, to stress here is that for these awards, you don't need to specify which of those 100 funds you're going for in the majority of cases, since it may well be, and it's often the case, that your application will fit several different funds. And our job, or one of our jobs, is to do that matching for you. I'd just like to flag up at this point that we do also put out calls for specific applications for a much smaller number of funds that have particular criteria and frequently need to be made on a bespoke application form, so not on the general awards form. The closing dates for those might be different to our standard closing dates, and relevant to Rother in this field are the 2 funds. One is the Rye Fund, and the other one is the Little Cheney Court Wind Farm Fund. And these you will find details being released during the course of the summer. So the early summer, look out for those, because those are very specific to groups within the Rother area. Please do read guidance notes very, very carefully. And if you're unsure about anything, give us a call, drop us an email. One of the key things the notes will clarify is whether you can apply for additional awards in addition to our general ones. So if you like having more than one grant at the same time, because in most cases you should only be in receipt of 1 grant per year, but that has changed, particularly with the crisis fund, where you can have a crisis fund grant as well as a general grant running at the same time. Obviously, there's more information on our website, a lot of detail there. But again, talk to the team at Rother Voluntary Action, Debbie and her colleagues, if you've got any questions about our grant programmes. So these general grants, they are for small volunteer-led community groups grassroots groups with some very small turnovers to medium-sized groups with an annual turnover, as I mentioned, of up to £1 million. Very occasionally, we'll invite applications from groups with larger turnovers. You might be interested to know that the significant number of groups we fund actually have an income of under £10,000 and no paid staff. So we really have that focus of small groups in our sites. Generally, as I say, the grants are for between £1,000 to £5,000 and last for a year. And here are some of the type of things that a grant might be supporting. It might be equipment, materials, events, outings, staffing costs, training and skills development, rental costs, volunteer expenses, organisational development. And related to that, here are some of the themes. Again, these are not exhaustive lists, but hopefully give you an idea of the scope. So there might be youth clubs, it might be lunch club activities for older people, community gardens, projects addressing homelessness, food banks. We've seen a lot of those, of course, recently. Health and wellbeing initiatives, community advice and support, projects focusing on drug and alcohol misuse, and of course, initiatives and projects and activities being led by communities experiencing racial inequity. But broadly speaking, my message to you would be, it's up to you to show in your application form how what you're asking for is needed for the project or the group to function. You are best placed to make that particular case. So, when applying to us, here are some things to bear in mind. Please use our online application process, and you access that through our website. Apply in good time. Don't leave it to the last minute. If you start to fill in your application form at midday on the deadline day, it's not a strategy that I'd recommend, because it will often show the end result. And it is a competitive process. Sadly, we get far more applications than we have money to give out. So you want to give yourself the best chance of success. The online form has been designed to allow you to edit it as much as you, or indeed anybody you choose, would like to, until you're ready to press the submit button. Do, as I've said, read any guidance notes, particularly actually if your organisation is a community interest company, a CIC, or a social enterprise. We have got guidance around those in terms of eligibility. Identify and contact your referee in good time. People ask us about referees and what exactly we're looking for. We're looking for sort of somebody who is accessible, somebody who knows about the work of your organisation or your group, and particularly if you're a new group, because we will quite often sort of follow that up. But the key thing is accessibility, and somebody who is able to answer some questions and obviously is not related to the group, so not a member of a management committee or a trustee or something like that. Somebody sort of said to me once, oh, can I put down my MP? Well, you could put down your MP, but I would sort of say make sure that that your MP knows about you and knows that they might get a call from us, and also that we can get hold of them. So again, it's not so much the status, but as the accessibility that we're looking for. Do check anything that you're not sure about with either the grants team or with RVA staff. A quick phone call will usually suffice. Other excellent sources of help, as I said, are through Rother Voluntary Action. There's a wealth of experience and expertise there. Make use of them. They work very closely with us. They understand our processes and how we operate. In order to be fair to everybody, please ensure that we do get your application and supporting documents. I've listed them there. They're things like your constitution, your accounts, your policies, your bank statement, by 5 o'clock on the deadline day. And also make sure that if you've had a grant from us before, we've actually got your monitoring up to date, because actually we do look at the monitoring, and that is a requirement of any further grant. And once you've submitted that application, it generally takes round about 8 to 10 weeks from the closing date to the notification of the outcome. If you've been successful, it's very straightforward from there. We will make the grant payment straight away to you. We'll send you logos, promotional literature, and we'll also send you the guidance about our online grant monitoring. As I said, we tend to get far more applications than we're able to fund. So if you weren't successful on this particular occasion, you don't have to wait any specified period before applying again, if that's what you'd like to do. What again I would sort of suggest is, if you are unsuccessful, then you use RVA, use the support they can give you to look at your application and actually help you in terms of resubmitting. You can contact us to talk through why your application didn't get funded, and we will give you feedback on what changes you might make before resubmission. So some tips when writing your application. We want to encourage as diverse a range of groups to apply for funding, and as broad a range of groups as possible. And we're continually striving to make our processes as inclusive as possible. So we don't have a model template. People have asked me, do you have a model template? We don't have a model template. But what I'm going to share with you here on the screen are some tips to consider when writing your application. I can't guarantee that using all of these will get you the grant, but I hope that it will give you the best chance of success when you apply. So the first one is, be sure you're ready to apply. You know, applying and putting in a strong, well-presented case with everything that's required does take time, even for a small grant, a modest one, you know, to Sussex Community Foundation. And it's not just your time, it's other people's time as well in the organisation. So give yourself plenty of time to do it. Many potentially good applications are let down because they've been rushed and not fully completed, and it does show through, and assessors will pick that up. The second one there is, reflect the funder's aims and objectives. As we said, applying is time consuming, and it can be really frustrating if you've spent a lot of energy and time on an application, only to find then that you don't meet the criteria. So before you put pen to paper or you start on your PC, check the published criteria carefully. Most of the things are obvious, things like closing date, if it's given exactly how long you'll have to wait before knowing the outcome, what type of groups the funder supports. Do they only support applications covering a specific location or issue? Is there an income ceiling for groups applying? Practical things such as, how much can you apply for? You'd be surprised, you know, we do indicate how much, but we still get applications applying for not just a little bit more, but quite a lot more. And you wonder whether somebody has read the criteria carefully. What documents do you need to submit, and have you got all of those? And if you're unsuccessful, how quickly can you apply again? Provide clear, relevant and reliable evidence. So when you come to write your application, put yourself in your funder's shoes, put yourself in my shoes. The funder may know nothing about your organisation. You will know everything, or the project or the activity that you're looking to have funded. So don't assume any level of prior knowledge on their part. Keep the project and activity description clear, simple and easy to understand. And please, jargon-free, or if you are going to sort of use terminology, please explain it. We do see applications that are often very, very full of terminology, full of jargon, and it's difficult for an assessor then to make a good, clear judgment. Our application form asks, why is the project or the service needed? And again, offer some local supporting data. And that might come from surveys, it might come from a questionnaire that you've put together, or perhaps some published information. And at the end, there are one or two sources that I will give you the links to where you can get useful information for that. Data can be very useful to show the needs of the people that you're supporting. And it can help convince funders that there is a need for your project and activity, that the solution that you're proposing will actually work, or is what people are looking for. And there are 4 questions here I think it's worth bearing in mind, and that you might be asking. What needs do the people you are supporting have? And what mechanisms and means do you have for knowing that they have these needs? And why is it important that the needs are met? And how will what you're proposing to do meet those needs? So support that data with some narrative. Direct quotes from people who've benefited from what you do are an excellent way of adding the human touch and bringing your application to life. And often that's what it's about, it's bringing the application to life. If you think we get, well, metaphorically, we get a large, big pile of applications to look at. What you want to do is to make sure that your application sort of stands out. Show that your activity, your project is well thought through. This is common sense, really, but do make sure that the funder can see that it's been well planned. Show what it is that will help you achieve your aims and give the project or the activity the best chance of success. And at this stage, it's lots of those who, what, how, when questions. Here are some examples, not an exhaustive list. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? And what do you need to do it? When and where will it take place? Is it time bound or ongoing? How are you going to measure the impact of what you've done? And again, put yourself in the funder's shoes. They'll want to be convinced that you can deliver the project with their money, particularly if your project may be a little bit off the wall or it carry a greater element of risk. We're not risk averse at all, and we like to send, and some things we know will not succeed. But as I say, you need to bear those points in mind. Be realistic and detailed when costing. The important thing is be as realistic as possible. So how much, what for, and for how long. So whilst in the case of our applications, you don't need to show every budgetary detail, please include the costs for all aspects of your project and activity. So if you're asking for funding to meet salary costs, it's very helpful to show how these amounts are worked out. If you simply write down £5,000 salary, that tells us very little. You need to break it down a bit more, give us a feeling for that. And similarly, if you're listing equipment and things like that, try and obtain estimates, quotes, or catalogue details. Show how your activity, your project can make a difference. The bottom line is that not only when a funder looks at an application, but also when awarding that grant, they will want to know and see evidence that their money is making a long-term difference to those beneficiaries from the project or the activity. So it's very useful at that particular stage, the application stage, to think about how you'll monitor your activity or your project, because every funder will want you to provide them with some information showing the progress you're making, and at the end of the project period, what difference the grant has made, and if it's been a successful investment. Monitoring is time consuming. It is very important. And in most cases, further funding will depend on satisfactory completion of feedback. And I'll share a few tips in a moment around reporting and monitoring. A tip about explaining the difference which a project can make is, rather than concentrating on what the project or the activity does, is to look at the impact it will have on the community. That's to say, the community benefit of what you're doing, the journey from a particular point to another point that you want to achieve, the change that you want to effect. And that, if you concentrate on that, should ensure that you keep yourself aligned with your funder's aims and objectives. And that can only increase your chance of a successful outcome for your application. And the bottom point there, please contact us if there's anything you're unsure of. We'd much rather have a brief chat with you as you're going along putting the application together and deal with those queries that you might have. So finally, what about reporting back on your grant? Well, why do you need to report back on the grant? Well, as I've said here, clear measures of success and the change achieved, and good systems of evaluating your impact helps inform decision makers, the people who work for you, those people who use your services, and it aids both the promotion of your work and actually future service planning. So why do we need your report? Well, we have a responsibility to our funders and donors to ensure that the donations are used well and that they make a real difference to their communities. Your evidence that you supply will help us understand your project better. Will you excuse me just for a moment? I will just have to take that. Let me sort of pick up on why we need your report. As I say, we've got the responsibility to our funders and the donors, the people who give us the money, because they want to see that their donations are well used, and they're going to make a real difference to the communities that are being supported. Your evidence that you're providing will help us understand your project better, and actually then enable us to report back to the donors and showcase what donated funds can achieve. And that in turn hopefully will inspire further donations, because that is our big challenge, to keep the money coming in, to attract more donors and to grow the size of the funds that we have available. So what will you need? So a little bit of sort of practical advice. So what do I think you'll need to provide effective reporting? Well, let me just pick up my notes again here. Probably the most important tip I can give is that reporting should be integrated into the whole grant cycle. So much so that you'll need to be thinking about it and how you're going to deliver it as you work on your application. Have a look at what the funder is expecting from you, and they should provide that very soon after awarding their grant, or indeed you can ask them even before you start to put your application together if you want. Their template, their guidance should give you a very clear idea of what their approach is, what sort of data, what type of evidence, and in what format you're going to need to pull together the stuff that you're going to use to report back to them on your project or activity, and actually enable you to do that as the whole thing progresses, and you will then meet their particular requirements. And if it's not clear, then just go back and ask them. If it's the case with Sussex Community Foundation, come back to us and ask. And a responsible funder should always ask for reporting or monitoring that's proportionate to the size of the grant offered. And that's really important. I think you will find that with our application form and with the monitoring form, that it's proportionate to the fact that we are giving what are essentially fairly small grants. Nothing should come as any surprise. So, when you come to do the monitoring, it shouldn't be, a 20-page monitoring form if it was a sort of small grant and the application form was a sort of couple of sides. That really doesn't make much sense. Plan and action so that you're collecting what you'll need as you go along. It really does make the whole task a lot easier and a lot less daunting at the end. So during the project cycle, assemble quantitative and qualitative evidence for your project. And you need to go back to your impacts, your outputs, your outcomes, and we haven't got time to go into those. But again, that's sort of guidance and things that RVA will be able to give you, and there's a lot of information about those aspects available online as well. Be prepared from the planning stage of your project. So think about who you're going to need to involve and how you're going to capture the necessary information. And that can usefully, as I say, be divided into these two main evidence collection streams. So the quantitative evidence, that's essential to show your financial accountability. And that's to demonstrate that you've spent the grant money according to the budget submitted. The other side, of course, is the qualitative evidence. That's rather like telling the story of your project success. So that's less about the hard facts, more about the experience of your service users and the results achieved. And again, I've simply just given you a very, very broad outline there. There's a lot more that you could delve into about those different types of evidence gathering. And of course, as I say, if you need help with reporting or monitoring, then get in touch with Debbie and her colleagues at RVA and who are there to support you with that. And I'm going to now move on to the final slide, which are some contact details and some further information. And these are useful links to sources of information to help you when putting together a funding application, together with our contact details and a reminder of the deadlines that I've spoken about. And I'll leave that sort of up there on the screen for the moment and say thank you very much for listening. It's a lot to take in, I know. The slides will all be sort of shared with you. And I'm very happy to deal with any questions, because I'm sure there are things that I've sort of said you're thinking, oh, I'd like to know a bit more about that. And if we can't answer them here, or we run out of time, then rest assured we will pick them up outside of the event and get back to you. Thank you very much.